The best city in America is home to some of the greatest professional athletes of all time. New York City sports teams have won a total of 54 championships across the big four major professional sports leagues. It's MLB, NFL, NBA, and NHL. But you know what? We're going to up that total to 56 because both the Liberty and NYCFC have brought recent titles to the city. But who are the kings of New York sports and belong on the New York sports Mount Rushmore? Here are our writers and columnists with their lists.
So on my New York sports Rushmore, I have Babe Ruth, Lawrence Taylor, Clyde Frazier, and Tom Seaver. And look, Babe Ruth is kind of by himself as a sports icon. You look at his numbers, even all these years later, 100 years later, they look like fiction. They look like cartoons. And he was a transformative figure, not just in New York, but in the entirety of the sport of baseball. Baseball needed a hero, needed a good guy after the Black Sox scandal. And here comes Babe Ruth, almost looking like Paul Bunyan with a bat. And, hit 714 lifetime home runs and, transformed the sport, but also made the Yankees into the Yankees. Look, I mean, all you need to know is that the Yankees had never won a pennant until Babe Ruth arrived. And in his second year, they won their first pennant. In his fourth year, they won their first championship, and it was on from there. Cornerstone member of the 27 Yankees, maybe the best baseball team of all time, certainly the most celebrated baseball team of all time, and he was the guy who was the cornerstone of that. I would say that Lawrence Taylor, in some ways, is almost the Babe Ruth of football, because his powers and his skills were so much beyond that of his contemporaries. I mean, you look back at some old game highlights now, and it's hard to believe. It's almost like, the rest of the rest of the game is taking place at one speed, and he's at 1.5. He's bigger than everybody, faster than everybody. He makes it look like the offensive linemen that he's going against are standing still, and he always gets his guy. He never misses a tackle. I'm sure that happened at some point during his career, but memory says it didn't. Highlights say it didn't, and his legends say it doesn't. And that's the way that I think a lot of Giants fans remember Lawrence Taylor. And importantly, he won 2 championships here and was an important part of both, if not the most important part of both. Look, Clyde gets another nod because of his 2 championships. Because, I don't want to ever reduce anybody's career to one night, but he had the greatest money game in the history of New York sports. Game 7 against the Lakers in 1970. 36 points, 19 assists, 7 rebounds, all with Willis Reed limping. And look, for good reason, Willis Reed gets a lot of credit for coming on the floor that night, playing about 24, 25 minutes, hitting 2 early shots, inspiring his teammates. But once that inspiration was handed off to Clyde Frazier, he made the most of it. And look, all through the early 70s, mid-70s, you couldn't go to a playground or a gym in New York and not find 5 kids wearing Puma Clyde sneakers, wanting to be Clyde, dressing like Clyde, shooting like Clyde, with a very distinctive jump shot with his elbow out. And, so he absolutely deserves a spot, especially because New York is such a basketball town. You definitely need a basketball player on that Rushmore list. And to me, it's Clyde Frazier. And look, number 4 is Tom Seaver. And again, he also won a championship in 1969. Maybe one of the 5 best pitchers who ever played the game in a sport that's been in existence for almost 150 years, more than 150 years. He was called the franchise. That was his nickname, but it was also what he was. He was the Mets franchise for many years. And when the Mets exiled him in 1977, he was probably the most depressed that New York has ever been about an athlete departing. And that's how much he meant to the Mets. That's how much he means to the Mets. Thankfully, late in life, there was kind of a reconciliation. He became, again, the face of the Mets in retirement until he passed away. But his accomplishments, he was so good. And, he won 311 games, and a lot of teams where he had to win the game 1-0 and 2-1. If he played on a team with some offense, he very easily could have won 340, 350 games. A lot of tough names to leave off that list. I mean, the first 2 that jump to mind are both baseball players who played for teams that no longer play here. One is Willie Mays, who obviously played for the Giants. His best years, his most maybe not his best years, but his most electric years. When he was young, when Willie Mays was a young baseball player, there might not have ever been a better baseball player than Willie Mays. And he did much of that damage in New York. Won a championship in 1954, was a rookie in 1951. He was, he wasn't the best of circumstances his last few years with the Giants because the ballpark was falling apart and they lost a lot of fans and they wound up ultimately leaving for San Francisco. But the mark Willie left here will live forever. And look, you can't say anything about sports in New York and not mention Jackie Robinson. If we're talking about just a performance standpoint, I think he winds up just a little bit off Mount Rushmore. But certainly as a man, he would probably be number one on a societal Rushmore. If we're talking about New York sports and society, obviously he broke the color line in 1947 and handled that with more grace and dignity than you can imagine, given all the invective that he had to absorb, given all the slurs he had to endure. Not in New York, which I think is an important point. He was welcome here immediately, and Brooklyn fans immediately took him in as one of their most beloved core. But certainly as he took the Dodgers cap and uniform elsewhere, places like Cincinnati and St. Louis, where they weren't quite so evolved yet. And he was able to bring a message of inclusion in baseball that is eternal. And so while it's tough to leave him off the list, I think what we're trying to do is a reflection of performance in addition to other issues. And to me, Jackie's just off that list, as are guys like Willis Reed, guys like Joe Namath, and other guys like that, guys like Rod Gilbert, Mike Bossy, some of the great hockey players who've come through this town.
All right, so I will get Namath out of the way because he has to be, in my opinion, in that top four. The other three here, I throw Babe Ruth in there because he's Babe Ruth. I mean, regarded as maybe the most famous, greatest baseball player in history. It was a home run champion for years before his records were broken. Mark Messier with the Rangers, he ended the 54-year drought without a Stanley Cup in New York. And much like Namath, guaranteed, basically said, we will win, which was our back page headline in the Post. Without question, he changed everything in New York hockey when he was brought here. And the other guy I would say is Clyde, Walt Frazier. Again, similar to Messier back in the day. He was the leader of that Knicks, those Knicks championship teams, the two teams. And we haven't had one since. And the fact that he's still relevant, just turned 80 this year, still on the Knicks broadcast, still as flamboyant as he's always been. And so he's still a fabric in New York sports. To me, that touches on all four of our major sports here, and I think all icons, and that'll never change in New York sports. So those are my four New York sports Mount Rushmores, without question.
Well, this was a tough one. Also, they're all tough. Babe Ruth has to be on it. Contrary to popular opinion, I did not cover Babe Ruth. I just want to make that clear. But the Bambino, the Sultan of SWAT, Babe Ruth, no words are necessary. Everybody around the world knows who Babe Ruth is. The other one is a no-brainer is Jackie Robinson, what he had to endure with the racism and the segregation in Major League Baseball and in society. And if I had three dinner guests, he'd be one of them, because I admire the heck out of his mental toughness and perseverance in the face of hate. So Jackie Robinson and Babe Ruth are the no-brainers. I also included Lou Gehrig. It was tough for me to pick among Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Derek Jeter, Yogi Berra, but the Iron Horse should be on there, I think. The tragedy of ALS, I'm the luckiest man to be a New York Yankee. And look at his stats. Lou Gehrig, in my view, he belongs. And the last one is Mark Messier. I considered Lawrence Taylor to be in this group, but Messier delivered the New York Rangers' first Stanley Cup in 54 years. He willed that team to victory. One of the great leaders in any sport. That guarantee against the New Jersey Devils in the previous game. So that's why I went with Messier. And I think Lawrence Taylor would have been my fifth, and Jeter was in the conversation as well. But I went with Messier. I didn't want three baseball guys. I threw the hockey world a bone.
All right, so here's our official New York sports Mount Postmore. Lawrence Taylor, Babe Ruth, Walt Clyde Frazier, and Jackie Robinson. With all of the legends that have stepped on a court, a field, a diamond, or even the rink to represent New York, are these the most iconic figures in New York sports history? We want to hear from you guys. Our list and comment section are always open for debate. But before you drop your Mount Rushmore for New York sports, subscribe to Post Sports Plus for full access to this series.